So, I'm trying to explain this, ask questions if it doesn't make sense. I got BLM truck, and in general, I always do my pump test with BLM truck using flow meter because you can't get the same readings. This is somewhat theoretical. We're going to have an opportunity to prove here. The Darley AGE's maximum pump performance, maximum amount of volume that it pushes out, is not at max RPM. It's just somewhere right underneath that, and you can't exactly find it without a flow meter. So that's one reason that the Femper tells me I got to use a flow meter to do it. And while on a BB4, which you can find on your Forest Service trucks, a lot of the time, not always, there's Darley AGEs on them too, you can theoretically crank it up to its max RPM, and that's going to be your maximum flow. That still is what we believe. Now, what we found here is one of the weird anomalies, and this anomaly says that, this anomaly is that this is one of the very few BLM trucks that has a BB4. So, since it has a BB4, we should be able to do with the nozzle here and just crank it up and take some measurements, and we've got a baseline to measure from. Have to have the flow meter. But since it's a BLM truck, the Femper's going to want you to have the flow meter readings anyway and have it all scheduled out like that. So we'll do it that way because, well, we should. The key here is that when you take the flow meter back to Gables to the other truck, it has the Darley AGE in it. I think it's a 2.5. So you'll have to kind of modify the throttle a little bit, back the throttle off, so you can get more volume out of it. But the one thing we have yet to do is prove that the BB4 is going to throw maximum volume at maximum RPM. We suspect it will. That's what we've already been told. And since we have the BB4, we need to do a pump test, and we have the flow meter, it's all hooked up, ready to go, and we're going to do it that way anyway, we can have that experiment. So what I would normally do here is break out my Femper, which you need to grab your Femper. There's the pump performance sheet on it, right? And you start going through and answering the questions. And I think it starts with, it's either the top or the bottom of the thing, we'll get to in a second. I think it starts with like shutoff pressure. So crank it up as far as it'll go. What's the max pressure I can get flowing 0 gallons a minute? And then we start following it down. It's like at 250 or 300 PSI, whatever the top one is. And to get that, I just crack my number 3 valve until I get about that pressure, or better yet, get exactly that pressure. And I look at my flow meter, and it tells me what my volume is. And what we'll do is, once we get that volume, we then go, okay, and I back my throttle off just a little bit so that I can see if my volume comes up after backing my throttle off. Well, if I back my throttle off, I might lose a little bit of pressure, so I may have to just barely bump this valve closed to get the pressure back up. So you gotta have to play with it a little bit while watching this gauge and watching this gauge to see what the volume is and looking for that maximum volume at that given pressure. That's how you do the pump test on the AGEs. It may or may not be how you have to do the pump test on those guys. So, yeah. That'll work, right? I'm not too worried about it. All right, so we got these categories. Date, well, that'll be today, but you probably only need to put it in once. Pump hours, we can get that. The idea here is to capture the data, and I'm gonna kind of approach this from what I remember of the last Femper I did went on, which had a different format, which had it set up to take measurements at specific pressures. So the first line is going to be max PSI, and then just write 0 GPM. Okay, and that'll be our measurement for shutoff, right? Flowing 0 gallons per minute. Maximum pressure we can get at 0 gallons a minute. Messages. Okay, and the next one is going to be at, let's say, 400 PSI. Alright, so just go down one block and put it in the max PSI, 400 PSI. Okay, and then 450. I'm sorry, strike that. 350. 300. 250. Just keep going down by 50s until you get to, well, go to 0. We'll see what happens, right? I mean, it'll be, really we need to go down to 50, I think, for what the Femmer had before. But we'll go down to 0, and we'll take measures and see what we get. It's not unvalid numbers that would be missing. We don't want to miss something. Thank you. Well, that'll be it. All right, so the idea here is you fire up the pump, let it warm up a little bit, right? Recirculate some water, open that number 2, let it warm up a little bit. Once it's warm, we'll crank it all the way up, and we're going to hit whatever maximum pressure is. We'll write that down. And then we will crack the number 3 and start flowing water, and we'll crack the number 3 until like 405, which is maxed out on this gauge. It may not even go down. We may not be able to get a measurement after that. Once we get it down to 400, we'll look at the flow meter, see what it's telling us, and we'll make some adjustments on the throttle and see if we can get it to come up. I don't think it'll work because it's a BB4. I don't think it'll change anything. I think if we turn it down, it will just go down. But we'll see what we need to do. At the same time, this is a completely valid pump test for a BLM truck based on the Femmer. Okay, cool? Okay, fire it up, start warming it up. We'll save some memory for it. Okay, so just talking to the camera here, warming up the pump, and I kicked that thing up around 1200 RPMs just to get it into a smooth run because they run like shit at a lower RPM, right? The 3-cylinder diesel, we talked about this earlier, how it's got a stroke where there's no power in it, and so it knocks really hard if you don't do that. Also, recirculate the water. Really all we're doing is warming up that motor before we take her for one hell of a ride. There you go. Okay, you're good. And I'll explain what I'm doing. Okay, so the science experiment part of this was, let's back up. We'll come back to the science experiment part. The reality part was we did a pump test, okay? Super easy because it was BB4. I didn't have to do a bunch of feathering, but you could see where I was kind of moving the valve back and forth to adjust the amount of water coming out. And I was trying to back off the throttle to see if I could get any see if I can get this number to come up any higher. And what I found was it didn't. It didn't come up higher. It might have at the like peak max. We were way out there. I might have got a couple extra gallons a minute out of it. That was it. As we came down, I tried it in a few different places after like the first 2 tests. It's like, yeah, that ain't happening. It's not. It does not need to back off to get more flow. And with the AGEs, there's actually a pretty dramatic jump. It can be like 10 gallons a minute when you back it off a little bit. But when you back it off, you have to kind of adjust this a little bit more so that you get your pressure where you want it to be. And that's the trick with the AGEs and the Femper pump test. So what I found was that it wanted to be maxed out. Max RPM is max flow out of a BB4. Cool. And then we have numbers that say a few things in here, and those numbers are so shutoff was 400 psi, which is kind of, I think that's in line with what I remember on the BB4. I can do 32 gallons a minute at 350 and 51 at 300. That's really good. That's actually higher than I'm used to with a BB4, but my mental picture of a BB4's performance is from like the 1990s or early 2000s, the old Model 30s with a Briggs & Stratton gas motor. They don't have the horsepower, right? So the horsepower gives me better performance, and that's why I'm seeing these numbers higher than what I expected. 250, 63, 280. Jesus, single pump, one hell of a hose lane. I mean, 200 psi is pretty good for a significant hose lane. It's pumping plenty of water. As we drop down in here at the 150 mark, I was at 93, 94 for that full 50 psi range. It was all about the same, and that's actually fairly typical of the BB4s. In that 50 to 100, you kind of have a flat spot in the performance curve, and once you start building extra pressure, you start getting it to move again. And then really, like full open, the maximum volume it'll ever flow is 100 gallons a minute, which is right in line with the BB4 as I remember that. So the science, well, I guess we did talk about the science experiment part, right? The BB4s do not need backed off to get max flow, where the Darley AGEs do. And we've demonstrated that, but I think we could do a better job of capturing that. So we need to do another one on a BB4, sorry, strike that, on an AGE to show how much that, I mean, just to show that jump in flow. We'll grab one of the local BLM engines to do it one of these days. So,
makes sense.
Yeah, cool. Question was, are we picking the RPMs off the sheet? And the answer is no. I think this is, I don't know if this is the new sheet or not. The last one I did for a BLM truck had a different sheet. So I was kind of just going off what I remember of that. And I think it was 50 PSI increments starting at like 400, because really that's the most you're ever going to get out of one of these most of the time. And so we just did 400 PSI. Well, first we did 0 for flow, and we got 400 PSI. And then below that, we started at 400 PSI, what our measurements were going to be. And it just so happens that was it. That was shut off. So we dropped her down to 350 by opening the valve until it drops down to 350. So we're just looking at pressures.
You're feathering the valve, not the throttle.
Correct.
The throttle's full open, RPM is high.
Because it's a BB4. If it was an AGE, it'd have to feather both.
Okay.
To look for that max flow at that pressure. So you have to adjust the valve and the throttle to get the volume up and keep the pressure in the window that you're looking for.
Okay.
Which is okay. Not really a window, but yeah.
Want me to tell them to come up here after the